What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 40 wide receivers for week one of the fantasy football season. I went through my running back rankings yesterday. I'll also have my quarterbacks out today, tight ends, defenses coming out tomorrow. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. I feel like the week one rankings are always fun because there's a lot of uncertainty. We're not quite sure how good every defense is going to be. Are these young wide receivers going to break out early on in the season? What about these proven veteran options who have switched teams? There's a lot up in the air, so let's dive right into it here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these elite options, the first few tiers, because obviously these players are all going to be locks in your lineup. So in tier one, I have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Moving into tier two, I have CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., and Drake London. Do just want to touch on a couple of these guys. For Malik Neighbors, I'm just hoping we can get like close to average quarterback play out of whatever combination of like Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart. We saw Neighbors be a fantasy wide receiver one as a rookie with just, a revolving door of garbage quarterback play. If he can get at least a little bit of something out of the quarterback position, he has a ton of upside here in 2025. And then the other guy is Brian Thomas Jr. If you guys have been watching the channel throughout the offseason, you know I am very in on this Jaguars offense, pretty much like all position groups. I think Trevor Lawrence is a great late round quarterback pick. I want to bet on pretty much all of these running backs at cost. And then the wide receiver position, I really like BTJ. I'm also very, very in on Travis Hunter. And I think this offense can really get off on the right foot here with a really soft matchup here against the Panthers defense that is just very, very weak. Now, moving into tier three, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Ladd McConkey, Tyreek Hill, and T. Higgins. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a little bit lower than he'd normally be. It's just not a great matchup here against the Packers. Typically, the Lions are going to be like top five in implied points. This week, they're a lot closer to league average. I actually think they're the betting underdog in this matchup here against the Packers, but obviously you're still starting him. A.J. Brown, I do think he's going to be better in these more like competitive matchups. Eagles are pretty solid favorites against the Cowboys. Probably going to be a pretty run-heavy game plan, but they're going to put up points. Obviously, A.J. Brown is in your lineup. Ladd McConkey, fun matchup here against the Chiefs on Friday night. Not a great matchup, but Ladd, back-end wide receiver one. I'm really interested to see how Tyreek Hill looks. The vibes admittedly have not been great, but he's still someone that I find myself drafting just because I think after you get past like Ladd McConkey, T. Higgins, it just seems like Tyreek Hill has way more upside than like the Mike Evanses, like the Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, right? Like the Garrett Wilsons, guys in that range. So I'm still in on Tyreek Hill. It would be nice to see if he goes out, has a big week one. And then T. Higgins, the Bengals are going to put up points. I don't think it's necessarily like the best matchup from a game script perspective because you want the Bengals to be getting into these shootouts. I don't know if the Browns offense is going to, hold up their side of the deal in that arrangement. So I could see it being, lower volume passing wise relative to like their standard matchup, but T. Higgins, fringe wide receiver one option. Now moving into tier four, this is where you might actually have some debates on who is sliding into your starting lineup, especially if you went, wide receiver heavy early on. So we have Xavier Worthy, Mike Evans, Tedero McMillan, Devontae Adams, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Terry McLaurin. I think all these guys are kind of in interesting spots here in week one. For Xavier Worthy, I am high on him all the way up as the wide receiver 14. The way I'm just kind of viewing this is like if you drafted Xavier Worthy, this is when he should be sliding into your lineup. You're going to have no Rashee Rice. He has the runway to be the number one target on this offense. And so if you drafted Worthy in like a, normal sized league, 10, 12, 14 teams, and he's not in your lineup week one, it kind of just seems like what was the point, right? Like if you cared enough to draft him, you were in on him as a player, this is the opportunity where he should be getting into the lineup. And there's no guarantee he goes out there and balls out, right? I do think this year he is high risk, high reward. But if you took the swing in the draft, I do think you should be taking the swing and throwing him into your lineup here in week one. For Mike Evans, I think he's going to start off the season strong. You have the Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan injuries. He is going to be the clear-cut wide receiver one here going up against the Falcons. Now, Tedero McMillan up here at 16 might seem high. Rookie wide receiver. We've never seen him in the NFL before. But I'm just very in on the player. I think this is a fine matchup here against the Jaguars. We have the Jalen Coker injury. Adam Thielen's gone. I think Ted McMillan's going to get peppered with targets. I like the talent, and I think he is going to hit the ground running here in week one. Then I have Devontae Adams, just a strong wide receiver too. Maybe it takes him a little bit of time to kind of ease into this offense, build that chemistry with Matthew Stafford, but don't have a ton of concerns heading into week one. Then we have JSN. I feel like he's going to be sliding in here as like a wide receiver two pretty much every single week. And then Terry McLaurin. Maybe some people have some concerns about him coming in, not having a ton of practice time, was holding out for, the majority of training camp, preseason, all of that stuff. But he's the number one target on a good offense. I feel like you can only fade him so much. I feel like, mid-tier wide receiver two is a fair ranking. Now, looking at tier 5, this is like mid to back end wide receiver twos. I have Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, Cortland Sutton, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, and Emeka Egbuka. I'm excited to see Marv heading into year 2. He's going to need to take a leap to live up to his ADP this year. We'll see if he can do that here in week 1. Then I have Garrett Wilson. I'm a little bit lower on Wilson than consensus. I do hope this Jets offense is fun. I like Justin Fields. I think for fantasy, he's a good late round quarterback pick. I want to be in on Breece Hall. So if this offense came out overachieved in week 1, I'd be excited. Wilson is the clear-cut number 1 target. He should have a solid target share, but it's also going to be in a lower volume passing attack. Then I have Cortland Sutton as my wide receiver 22. I think in like this fringe wide receiver 2 range is probably where he's going to slot in throughout most of the season. I do like Jalen Waddle here. I think he's going to have a bounce back in 2025. Was super consistent in his first 3 seasons, had a really rough 2024, but I do think he'll be a bigger part of this offense than he was last year. Then we have Devonta Smith. I mean, this is pretty much where he's going to be pretty consistently. He's drafted as more of a wide receiver 3 because he's a lower upside guy, but on the season's end, he's very likely going to be somewhere in the wide receiver 2 range. Maybe not the best matchup from like a passing volume perspective, but they're going to score points. He's going to have a lot of touchdown upside in this game. Wide receiver 24, I feel like is reasonable. And then someone who I am very high on here in week 1, Emeka Egbuka, another rookie who we have not seen play, but I feel like he is pro ready. He had a lot of experience in college. He was competing with a bunch of other stud wide receivers. He's gotten rave reviews out of training camp. And like I talked about with Mike Evans, you have Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan out. Emeka Egbuka is going to be in there on 2 wide receiver sets, and I think he is going to be able to produce right away in week 1. Now, moving into tier 6 are like wide receiver 3 options. We have Zay Flowers, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, George Pickens, Jerry Jeudy, Jamison Williams, Rome Odunze, and Ricky Pearsall. Zay Flowers throughout his career so far has just been locked in as a wide receiver 3. That's where I'm going to have him until he shows us something else. DK Metcalf, first game here with the Steelers. I think Metcalf's interesting. You can certainly see the downside where the Steelers offense is just terrible. They're run heavy and he doesn't really pan out. But you can also see where, Rodgers is targeting him pretty heavily. He's getting very involved. This is just a tough matchup to start off the season here, though, going up against this Jets defense and their secondary. Then I have DJ Moore and Rome Odunze in this tier. I think we could see Rome Odunze take over as the wide receiver 1, but in the first week of the season, Rome Odunze coming off kind of a disappointing rookie season, I'll still give the nod here to DJ Moore. Then at wide receiver 29, I have George Pickens. I think for my wide receiver start-sit video, if there was one player that there was the most disagreement on, it was George Pickens. And a lot of the comments I was getting kind of, centered around the passing volume. The Cowboys are going to be trailing. It's going to be a pass-heavy game script. And while I do agree with that, they are really low in the Vegas implied point total. I want to say they're like the 5th lowest in the mix with like the Titans, Jets, just like, Saints, like these offenses that we think are just going to be terrible. And so passing volume can only take you so far, especially for a guy like George Pickens, who I don't necessarily think is going to be like this super strong fantasy option because of the volume he's commanding. Like, I think that gives more of a bump to CD than it is like George Pickens, who I think is going to be that big play touchdown upside guy. Now, it's kind of funny because a lot of people thought I was low on Pickens. I had him as a fringe play. I am much higher from a season-long perspective on George Pickens. I just think week 1, this is a tough matchup, new offense. If they're not projected to put up a ton of points, I have a tough time getting excited about George Pickens as like a set it and forget it start in my lineup. After Pickens, someone who I think has a really strong matchup is Jerry Jeudy, and I do hope we see Joe Flacco go out there, really just sling it, give his pass catchers an opportunity to put up big games. We saw that with Jameis Winston last year at Jerry Jeudy. David Njoku was very productive with Jameis last year. Njoku was also very productive with Joe Flacco in the stint where he was the starter in 2023. And it's a favorable matchup here against the Bengals. So if you have Jerry Jeudy and you were going to start him, this would be a pretty decent week to play him. Then a wide receiver 31, I have Jamison Williams. Definitely more of like a boom or bust on a week-to-week basis. It's not a great matchup here, but he did kind of establish himself as a fringe wide receiver 2 last year. I think bumping him down to like mid-tier wide receiver 3 is fair based on the matchup. Already talked about Roma Dunze. I'm really excited to see what we get out of Ricky Pearsall. I think some people are just going to have him auto-locked in their lineup with the injuries around him, his kind of late season breakout last year. I do really want to be in on him. I'm not fully sold on him as a talent just because I know like last year the circumstances were crazy, him coming into the season, getting shot, but he really had like a 2-game sample size where he was really productive. So I don't think it's a guarantee he comes in here and just balls out early on. But I will say if he goes out week 1 against a pretty tough Seahawks defense and logs a really nice game, he will be ranked much higher in the week 2 rankings. And then the final tier, tier 7, we have Travis Hunter, Calvin Ridley, Jacoby Myers, Chris Olave, Matthew Golden, Stephon Diggs, and Deebo Samuel. Like I talked about, I am very in on this Jaguars offense. Now, sure, there's some risk playing Travis Hunter week 1. There's some reports that like they're still kind of working through his usage. Based on what we've seen this offseason in the preseason game, I do think he's going to be a pretty big part of their offense, playing close to like full-time wide receiver snaps. And like I talked about, I do like this matchup here against the Panthers. So if you're someone who, wants to play a little bit more safe, play a Calvin Ridley, a Jacoby Myers, I get it. Personally, I am in on Travis Hunter this week. Then we have Calvin Ridley, and this is just a really tough matchup to start off the season with, not only for Ridley, individually, but also just a rookie quarterback going up against arguably the best defense in the NFL, if not top 3, top 5. So I would kind of temper my expectations here with Calvin Ridley. Then we have Jacoby Myers. He's had the trade request, but if he's playing week 1, he does have a pretty high weekly floor. He's going to command volume. Not really terrified of this Patriots defense. Then we have Chris Olave. I feel like the Saints are going to be in a lot of pass-heavy game scripts just because they are going to be trailing. I do like the talent of Chris Olave. Fringe wide receiver 3 is where he's going to slot in here. Then I have Matthew Golden, another rookie in the top 40. Some people might think he should be in the mix with like Travis Hunter, Emeka Egbuka. And if you're really high on Golden as a prospect, then I think that makes sense. Personally, I do think there's a big gap in terms of like the quality of prospect that he was compared to Travis Hunter, Emeka Egbuka. So, I'm going to adjust for that. But I think he has a prime opportunity to come in, be a number 1 option for a good offense right away. And hopefully he can capitalize on it. Then I go with Stephon Diggs, first game back from the torn ACL. Maybe temper expectations early on in the season, but I do think he's going to be involved early on and should have a decent amount of targets in this matchup. And then my wide receiver 40, I have Deebo Samuel. I'm not the biggest Deebo Samuel guy this season, but week 1, Terry McLaurin missing a lot of time in training camp. Maybe he can come out, already start a bounce back season here in 2025. So that is going to wrap it up for my top 40. Let me know your thoughts down below. Who should be higher? Who should be lower? Any fantasy questions? I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as I can. But thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.